Your book almost starts off like science fiction. And I think we talked about this pre-show where I
chatted.
said, oh, yeah, 10 years from now. And you're like, no, hold on. Let me stop you right there. The idea that somebody can read our brainwaves and possibly see what we're thinking, I know it sounds impossible or so far in the future that it's not worth worrying about. But here's some stuff to worry about, Jordan.
First, I would say most people, when I start to talk about the coming age of consumer brain wearables, the fact that we can track and hack your brain, they're all like, oh, yeah, okay, I've got a lot of things to worry about, but that's not something I'm going to worry about because that's far off into the future. No, it's here. It's arrived. There are already consumer brain sensors. I'll back up even a step further.
Sure.
People are very familiar with, at this point, having a heart rate sensor in their watch.
Right.
They're very familiar with a Fitbit that they wear that tracks their movements.
I got a ring on right now that does that, right?
Yeah.
No big surprise.
Probably picks up like mood and changes in, temperature. People are used to their...
It's not a mood ring. This isn't 1991.
No.
No,
but there are like the Aura. Do you have the?
I have the Aura ring.
Or?
Yeah. So it's, and they sponsor the show, so you can mention them by name. Shout out to Aura Ring. Okay. I don't know if we have a code, but whatever. Check the deals page. Yeah, I think it does body temperature, whether I'm sleeping. Although I'm always sort of like, how does it know if I'm actually asleep? Sometimes it's a little bit wrong, but it's kind of hard to complain. It's amazing. It's a ring, and it still knows that I'm moving around or that I have a fever. It's incredible.
Right. It's very small, and it tells a lot of information about you. And you're right. It's making inferences based on how much you're moving, and what your temperature is, and how temperature changes when all of those things. It's making inferences, but it's pretty good. People are used to GPS location being tracked pretty much at all times now through their phones and other devices that they carry around with them. But when I tell them that, okay, and now it's the era of brain sensors doing the same thing, they're startled. It just hadn't occurred to them that we would soon have sensors that you could wear on your scalp and in your ears that would pick up your brain activity in much the same way that all of the rest of our bodily information is being decoded. And those sensors are already being used by millions of people worldwide in headsets that they wear and use for meditation. And they are already being used in workplaces where more than 5,000 companies worldwide are using even just one of these companies' devices, a company called SmartCap, that uses these sensors that are in baseball caps or on a headband or inside of a hard hat that picks up brain activity. And here it's the electrical activity in the brain that it's picking up to try to decode if a person is wide awake or asleep. And launching literally within the next few weeks and also in the next few months are a bunch of products that are now multifunctional ones. And what by that I mean, we both have in earbuds right now, and those earbuds can allow us to take conference calls and do podcasts and listen to music. And the next generation of them have brain sensors in them that also pick up the electrical activity in the brain and allow us to track a lot of what's happening there. Likewise, headphones, major headphone manufacturers have partnered with neurotech companies so that the soft cups that go around your ears have a bunch of sensors that are put into them that pick up brainwave activity as well. And so the era of tracking and decoding and even manipulating and changing the brain has arrived. And it's about to go mainstream as the huge tech companies like Meta and Google and Apple and Microsoft are all in on developing and integrating these devices into their devices.
If I didn't know who you were and we hadn't talked and clicked in the way that we did, I would almost think like, this is one of those kooky... She's like reading into stuff like, oh my God, they're putting microchips in the vaccine, right? It's like almost like that sounding level of, this is impossible. How is it possible? How are my brain waves coming out of my head into earbuds that don't exist yet and being read by somebody? It just sounds fake. I know it's not because I read the book, but it sounds, I can't wrap my tiny brain around this yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so first of all, I would say one of the challenges of being in the space that I'm in is that there are a whole bunch of people who believe that their brains are being tracked, which they're not.
Well,
and there are a whole bunch of people. They wear tinfoil
hats. Like, are those people now? Have we come that far?
I mean, maybe in the future, right? But like, there are a whole bunch of people who have believed for a very long time that, that there have been chips placed in their brains and that their brains are being hacked and tracked by other people. I'm talking about a very mainstream, real technology that every major tech company is investing in, developing, and many are already on the market. So Meta, for example, just had a big announcement a couple of weeks ago. They've had huge layoffs across the board. Yeah. It's unclear exactly what's happening with the metaverse for them, but it's very clear that they are doubling down on their AR investment, on augmented reality. And one piece of Reality Labs, and probably the biggest acquisition, one of the earliest things that I write about in chapter 1 of the book, is their acquisition of this company called Control Labs. And Control Labs was like my aha moment. I've been thinking about neurotechnology forever, but it was hard to see how it could go mainstream, both because there wasn't like the killer app to make it mainstream, but also it was a separate device you'd have to wear. It wasn't a sensor that you could embed into everyday technology. And I saw this presentation by Control Labs at the time where they were talking about taking neural sensors, brain sensors, and putting them into basically the form of a watch to pick up brain activity as it goes from your brain down your arm, and through motor neurons tells your hand to type or to move or to swipe. And they were like, this could be the universal control over all of the rest of our technology. We can integrate this into a watch. And I was like, wow, that blew my mind. First of all, the idea that you could type from your mind, that you could swipe from your mind, that you could interact with the rest of your technology rather than just what was then niche applications, things like meditating with neural feedback. And so I was like, okay, Apple's going to buy them because that's going to go right into the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
And when a year later, Meta announced that they had acquired them for at least $500 million, I was like, wow, this is about to get incredibly real because if Meta has decided that this is part of its suite. And so a couple of weeks ago, they announced that they're launching in early 2025 with their neural interface watch together with AR, and that it will be the way in which you'll navigate. It's the joystick, the controller. And that's a big deal. Other companies are already launching their earbuds and their headphones. But the fact that like the major tech players are all in on this isn't science fiction. I'm not some crazy person. I'm telling people about technology that somehow the mainstream has just missed, that the target of all of the major tech companies, the next big thing in technology, is the quantification, the decoding, the tracking and hacking of our brains.
How accurate is this stuff? Because it seems like, okay, maybe I can turn a switch on and off, or I can look at something and click on it, but it seems like, how detailed are these things able to get? Am I able to, like when I dictate on my phone, I'm talking out loud. Do I just not have to do that anymore? Or is it more like, okay, no, you can open your web browser and click on something and that's pretty much it. The rest of it is the same.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it depends on the application. So first, EEG is what we're talking about right now. There are different kinds. And so EEG means electroencephalography. What that picks up is brain wave activity. So as you think, as you do anything, you have neurons firing in your brain. They give off tiny electrical discharge. Hundreds and thousands and millions of neurons are firing as you think and do things. And those happen in patterns, characteristic patterns that can be picked up from EEG, from these different sensors. And then AI, as it gets better and better and better, can decode what those patterns mean. So first, it depends on the sensors. Like, are we talking about one in each ear, which is not picking up a huge amount of brain activity? Are we talking about 16, like the ones that are going to be in your headphones? So you're going to have more activity that's being picked up. There's some noisiness, like interference with muscle movement and eye twitching and other things. And then there is also, like, I have a lot of hair. The hair can interfere with the signal quality. And so I'd say, these are not perfect in picking up data to begin with. But the AI has gotten much better. The sensors have gotten much better. And the ability to filter out noise and filter out muscle twitches have gotten much better, so that at this point, brain states can be picked up. You can't literally decode complex thoughts. Like my inner monologue, simple EEG in my ears is not going to pick that up. But don't let that fool you into thinking then there's nothing to worry about, because there's a lot of information you can probe from. So simplest things you can pick up are you paying attention? Are you engaged? Are you bored? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you tired? So brain states like that. But just as you described, like left, right, you can pick up. And translating that kind of brain activity into moving around the screen or on, off for your light switches, those kinds of things you can already do. And then getting to more complex, navigate around the screen, replace your mouse, replace your keyboard, that's coming. And decoding your intention to type, that's part of what Control Labs has been working on and seems to be making huge advances on, which is instead of typing on an actual keyboard, you can think about typing once you've trained it. So like you practice a couple of times, it picks up what those signals are, then it remembers those are the signals, and you think about doing the same thing, and it decodes that activity.
See, that's really interesting just from a medical perspective. I'm terrified of getting something like ALS, the one where your body just sort of slowly shuts down. It's just a nightmare, and I pray that they just fix this or figure out how to cure this. But in the meantime, if somebody can't type, I mean, even if you just are quadriplegic or something like that, I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if you could just look at your screen instead of having to say everything out loud, which must get exhausting after a while? You could just sort of look at something and you could swipe and the thing would move for you. And then maybe you dictate a few things here and there, but the rest of the navigation is all done with your eyes. And it maybe even knows. It might not even need that. It might just be able to know what you're looking at. But to have the less effort, the better, depending on your level of ability, I suppose. And if you can't move at all.
Even not necessarily depending on your level of ability. But yeah, first of all, I would say the possibilities for people who have locked-in syndrome, who have ALS, who have the inability to communicate, who've lost their ability to speak, who've had a stroke, who are suffering paralysis and no longer have the physical movements that they once had, to be able to regain their independence and ability to communicate with other people through brain-computer interface is extraordinary. And there's implanted technology. This is what people have most heard about. It's stuff like Neuralink or BlackRock Neurotech. There's only about 40 people in the world right now who have those kinds of implanted technology, and those are all part of clinical trials. But still, the advances are unbelievable in that group. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a report out of a research lab with an ALS patient who was able to communicate at 62 words per minute, who otherwise could not speak just from brain-computer interface technology. I mean, just by comparison, Stephen Hawking, at the end of his life, having the best technology available to him, he didn't have brain-computer interface, right? But people were creating custom technology just for him to enable him to speak. He was only able to speak at 15 words per minute. For most of his life, he was at 1 word per minute.
Oh, gosh.
And so, like, that's extraordinary. The possibility is amazing. But I mean, you think about it for you too, Jordan. Like you're driving. I know you would never text while driving. But,
I don't. I definitely. I actually don't do that because you basically just need one close call, and you're like, oh my god. Or you have to have kids, and then you realize you probably shouldn't do that. Yeah.
But suppose you need to send a quick message, and you would never do that while driving. Some people would. They shouldn't. But you just think about it and you're like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to think about sending off the message. Now, some people do that voice. You have like my car has a little button you can push and it's really inaccurate. And most of the time I just get so frustrated I give up on trying to actually send the text message. But, you can do that. You can type thinking about typing. And the average person, I think, will find that the friction of interacting with other technology that we haven't even realized as friction, like it's a little weird that we have to use a mouse to move around the screen.
Yeah.
It's weird that we're on a QWERTY keyboard, right? There are these like steps between what you're thinking and what you're communicating with the rest of the world that are actually a lot of friction in getting your thoughts and communication out. And so I think idea of a lot of this is eventually it could make our interactions with other technology much more seamless. You just think about moving and you move, or you move your hands, when you're in virtual reality, and you end up just moving in exactly that same natural way. You don't have to use a joystick that says go left. You just think about going left, or you go left, or you swipe your hand left and you're there.
I suppose I don't know if it's the inverse, but the other direction of this would be then it sort of follows that the technology would be able to speak back to you without you. Like I'm looking at you on a screen. So if I wanted to bring this computer setup with me, I have to bring a freaking screen, a keyboard, and a mouse. So if they figure out the keyboard and the mouse, great, but I still need this damn screen. So if the technology can communicate back into my brain without, in a very similar way, perhaps, then all I need is the computer, which essentially, I don't know what size the computer is in my phone, but it's at least the size of my phone or smaller, but there's a screen there too. And there's a lot of battery tech in there. So what if we didn't need the battery to be as big because we didn't need the screen, the touch screen and the display and the lights and all that stuff? Maybe the phone could be half the size or twice the power or whatever it is, and I'm just interfacing with it while it's in my pocket using my brain.
Yeah, entirely possible, right? I mean, I think the possibilities are limited only by our imagination for what could eventually be made possible. And there are researchers, I talk about in a chapter I call Beyond Human in the book. I talk about some of the research that's already been done to try to enable brain-to-brain communication. And I give this example of this experiment, which kind of blew my mind. It's really, we're going to look back on it one day and think like, oh, how primitive was that? But they wanted to see if they could put 3 different people in 3 different rooms and have them play a game of Tetris with each other, where the 3 different people would only communicate with each other brain to brain, and they would only communicate with the Tetris game by brain. And so one person who was the receiver, is what they called them, would get messages from the 2 different senders. The 2 different senders would see the full screen. They'd see the block falling from the top. They'd see the bottom of the screen and whether or not the piece needed to be turned, and if it needed to be turned or, turns left or right in order for it to fit at the bottom of the screen and clear the line. And so there would be one person who would send the message by brain using one of these EEG headsets. The person who was receiving it would have an EEG headset, and then they had something that writes to the brain called transcranial direct current stimulation. So they'd get like a little flash in their brain, which would help them visualize and give them the kind of yes/no message to their brain directly. And they do this, they play for a while. They did this, I think, like 16 different times with a number of different groups. And the groups were able to do this, winning at like a rate of 88% of the time.
Wow.
Just by this brain-to-brain communication. And there's even been research studies where people have done brain-to-brain text communication. Like, think of like a text message you want to send and then transmit it to the other person by brain-to-brain communication and then have them visualize it. And that's pretty extraordinary stuff too. So yeah, I mean, we might not need screens.
But they're not looking at a screen. They're just seeing the text in their head.
So the person sees the text in their head, right? Meaning they have a screen in front of them. They see the message and then transmit it not through the computer, but through brain-computer interface to the other person. And then the other person sees a The other person sees a screen.
Oh, okay, because I was like, holy crap, that's even more incredible. Okay, so no, they see a screen.
No, but the first experiment is more incredible because they are seeing the yes-no in their brain, right, through a light.
That is cool.
It's literally like a flash of light that is helping, like giving them the message directly to their brains.
So this is already sort of happening. We're just at the level of smoke signals in some way. In low resolution.
For that part, yeah. I mean, brain-to-brain communication, we are at the earliest stages of it, right? We're in kind of infancy, scratching the surface. But conceptually, people are already playing it out, right?
Crazy. That's amazing.
And that is crazy.
That's amazing.
It is crazy.
Gosh. Does it only work for conscious thought? So I was thinking when we were talking about the medical stuff, okay, great, I can communicate when I'm unable to type or speak. That's amazing. What happens? Where are we if somebody's in a coma and it's like, what's going on in their brain? Can we do that yet, or is that stuff buried under layers that we aren't able to access?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good question, and it's such a hard question. So I'm going to break it down in 2 ways. One is this is what we've just been talking about is consciously transmitted communication and thought. But you can pick up a lot of pre-conscious signals, and that's part of some of the scary stuff that I write about in the book is kind of probing the brain for information. So I could show you an image, like I really want to know if you react positively or negatively to images of Republicans and Democrats. And so I show you a bunch of pictures, and I say, I don't want you to tell me your political affiliation. I just want to guess it.
Sure.
And so I show you, a bunch of different Democrats, and I show you a bunch of different Republicans, and then I look at the unconscious signals in your brain, both recognition, but also emotional responses that you have. And then I say, okay, I can tell with a pretty high degree of accuracy what your feelings are with respect to these candidates and these parties. I can even do that with messages.
That's interesting. So, like the machine's broken. It says you can't stand any of these people. I don't know. I have to recalibrate it.
Right. Well, that's why I then shift to maybe I'm going to show you some messaging as well that like aligns better with the parties. That might help me too. But I can pick up that kind of unconscious information. But the second part you asked, which is the person who's in a coma, this is really hard stuff because there are, there was a long period of time where we thought people who are in a persistent vegetative state, meaning like that's a medical and diagnostic classification, that they there's no more conscious thought, like that's gone. They can't, there's nothing happening in that way there. And part of that was an inability to access their thoughts. And so there were researchers who started to take people who had been classified in a persistent vegetative state and put them into large neurotechnology machines called functional magnetic resonance imaging machines. It's basically like an MRI, but it's looking at the brain instead. And they would ask them a series of questions, and they would say, like, if the answer to the question is yes, so there were yes, no questions, think about walking through the rooms of your house. If the answer to the question is no, think about playing tennis. And this would engage different parts of the brain, motor activity or spatial kind of reasoning. And they found that for a few of the patients that they put in, they got responses.
Oh, God.
And they got accurate responses. And they came to believe that, somewhere between like 20 to 40% of the people who'd been diagnosed as being in a persistent vegetative state were actually minimally conscious or had locked-in syndrome.
Oh, my God.
And
that's such a nightmare. So they're trapped in an unconscious body?
Right.
Sort of?
I mean, that is like most of our like worst nightmare, right? And so, a different project that I've been working on for the past few years, I've been working with something called the Uniform Laws Commission. And the Uniform Laws Commission has representatives from every state that have been appointed, usually by the governor of that state, to work on model laws that could then be where uniformity of laws is useful in the United States. And one of those laws that the Uniform Laws Commission has written is called the Uniform Determination of Death Act, which has two parts. The first part is the death as most of us understand it or know it, which is when like the heart stops beating and you stop breathing, which we call circulatory and respiratory death. But for a limited number of people, maybe you have like a hospital heart attack or something like that. And you come into the hospital and you're put on mechanical ventilation. Some of those people have had such catastrophic brain injury that they have no more brain activity, right? They're never going to wake up again. They're never going to breathe on their own again. They have no brainstem reflexes. And those people are classified as being brain dead, is the kind of shorthand of it, right? Or death by neurologic criteria. And it turns out to be, so we're working on updating that definition because it's kind of fallen out of step, the legal definition from the medical practice. And that's a tricky category if you think about the question you asked, because the more we learn about the brain, the more questions are like, how can you know for sure that there's complete loss of brain activity, that it's irreversible loss of brain activity? Those are some of the kind of complex questions that people grapple with in that.
Oh man, it's so upsetting to think that there's people right now on breathing machines who are like, oh my God, wake me up or kill me. This is awful. I can't move. I can't do anything. But I know like the time is passing and they can't do, oh God, it's so absolutely
we just don't know.
nightmare.
We don't have access, right? I mean, so like you're assuming all of that happening, and we like the even more terrifying part, just to layer on top of that, is we don't know what's happening, right? We have no way to actually decode, like, what are they thinking or feeling? Even if we can get to some basic yes, no answers, but even that, like, are they thinking like, I wish you would turn off the machines? Are they able to think in that full way? Like, have they suffered so much brain injury that doesn't happen? And I should just distinguish that's different than the people who would be classified as brain dead. Those people have literally no, I mean, it's all functions of the entire brain have stopped. They don't even have brainstem reflexes. The people who are in a persistent vegetative state don't satisfy that classification.
Yeah, just I'm thinking about somebody who like feels pain and can't do anything about it. It's just, oh God, it's new nightmare unlocked, unfortunately. That's just awful.
Yeah.
What
I do hear for some people, by the way, in reading the book, that it is new nightmare unlocked for them in multiple ways. So
yeah, it is impressive though what we can see in the brain. I know you mentioned in the book smart football helmets that can detect concussions. That's really incredible and sounds really useful. I know you kind of just mentioned before, you can tell if somebody's a conservative or a liberal or any number of, I guess, yes, no kind of or emotional response questions. It seems like we're quickly heading to a place where people in the government could maybe look inside our heads, and depending on the resolution of the machinery here. And I think that's one of the scariest parts of all of this. You said that this is already happening in China. What's going on with it in China? That just doesn't surprise probably anybody that they're experimenting with this first.
Right. So, there are smart helmets. There's possibilities of testing for epilepsy. There's all kinds of things that in our own hands, neurotechnology can enable us to do. It can help us to make brain health just as important as all of the rest of our health. It can help us to quantify it and access it. But anything we can access, right, presumably other people can access as well. And if, the devices are issued by a company, then the company has access to that brain data as well. In many instances already, governments have gained access to the wearables that people are using, from heart rate to your phone to your email to everything else that you use, all the rest of the technology that's quantifying and tracking things. And in China, they're already using neurotechnology to track workers and students. And it sounds like doing so in some dystopian ways, which should surprise no one. But, was still startling to me because in the same way of, is this just some person who's talking about science fiction? I would imagine it like, oh gosh, imagine if an authoritarian government started to use this technology in ways that would interfere with people's freedom of thought. And then boom, like news articles, it's happening in China. And so here's a couple of things that are happening there already. One is China has already required workers to wear brain sensors during their workday to track fatigue levels for a conductor, a commercial driver, workers on factory floors, their attention, if their mind is wandering. There are even reports where if their emotional instability or just feelings show that they could be disruptive to the workplace, they're sent home, which is not a good thing if you're in China and said and told you're not doing your job, you need to go home. In the Wall Street Journal broke a report a number of years ago about how in a province in China that there was an elementary school that was requiring all of the students to wear EEG headsets that was monitoring their attention levels during their school day. And then there was a console in the front of the classroom where the teacher could look at the students and see who was paying attention and whose mind was wandering. And that information was even sent to the teachers and even sent to the parents and to the state as well. And as you think about a system like a social credit system that's built on, are you paying attention enough in school, or is your mind wandering? That's terrifying enough. But you add on top of that, we've been talking about what can the technology do. It almost doesn't matter what the technology can do if the government requires you to wear brain sensors and says, we are tracking your brain throughout the day. And if you think any thoughts that are divergent or dissident, or we will know, right? And when you have that kind of informational asymmetry and power asymmetry, I worry about the chilling effect on the very ability to think freely, to dare to think freely, and the conformity and, kind of inner silence that can result from that. And so, one, you can already decode a lot more than people think. And even if you couldn't, the mandated use of it is terrifying in an environment like that.
It's like the TV that looks at you and listens in 1984, only it's in your brain, which is way worse.
Yes.
Right?
No, I agree. I mean, I went back and read 1984 recently, and I was like, oh, wow. Yeah.
We have this. Only it's worse.
We have this. Yes, exactly.
It's the chapter where the TV was blocked by a bunch of stuff. They don't have to worry about that because it's in your head now.
That's right.
I get using this and maybe we get discounted insurance or other benefits because I don't know, insurance companies are going to be on this if they can. Maybe we go there in a second, but it seems like this could be used to sell us things in the future. And I kind of assume that's where Meta is going to start with this. Like, you think your ads are targeted now, wait till it knows what you're thinking in that moment about how you're fat and you got a wedgie and needed pants with a more comfortable waistline, which is a random example, people. Just random. Yeah. But like, they're going to know. They're going to know, oh, man, I'm bored. You know, I should go on a vacation. Look at the weather outside. And it's like, oh, are you bored and you want to go on vacation? Look how nice Turkey is right now. Oh, yeah. Maybe I'll book some tickets.
Or how about this? Like, you're hungry as you're walking past a store. You know, between your phone and your brain sensors, we're able to pick up and give you real-time alerts of like, hey, 20% discount to walk into the store right here and get yourself a nice bar of chocolate, right? I mean, it's the precision will be startling. So, yeah. So first, I should say, companies are already using brain activity information to market to individuals. There's a whole field called neuromarketing, and I write about this as well, which is, you know, a field which is really designed to see how brains react to marketing. People are terrible about reporting their actual preferences. And I shouldn't say terrible. People report it. It just doesn't actually reflect what they do and what they buy. Right. Yeah. And so they're very willing to report it. It's just not that helpful. And actually marketing to people is what marketers have found over time. And so instead, marketers started to wonder, could we look at how brains react to information instead? So could we show them a marketing advertisement and see, do they show engagement? Do they show enthusiasm? Do they show boredom? Does their mind start to wander in the middle of the commercial? And, you know, does it mind wander to some different area? And none of this stuff happens in isolation. Eye tracking, all of the other metrics that have been used for a long time are added to brain activity. But it turns out brain activity adds a lot to the marketing information. It tells how engaged and at which point you're the most engaged. It tells, you know, how you feel. When Avatar, the original Avatar, was first launched, James Cameron was approached by a neuromarketing company who said he had said something in a magazine about in an interview about you know, how he thought how people he thought would be so deeply engaged by the Navi world and the imagery and the cinematography, and you know, their brains would light up or something. And a neuromarketing company was like, hey, look, we can actually show you the brains lighting up. You know, can we offer you our services? So he partnered with them, and they trialed different trailers for Avatar using neuromarketing, seeing the extent to which people responded favorably or disfavorably, and how engaged they were with the different ones, and how emotionally charged they were in response to it. And they went with the trailer that had the strongest neuromarketing features. And I mean, you know, you could attribute it to the neuromarketing or many other things, but that was one of the most successful movies of all time. You know, hence it being remade and relaunched and everything that's happening with it right now. So that's already happening, but that's happening with volunteers who are choosing to go into labs or at home using headsets to help marketers figure out how our brains react. Like, who needs test subjects when we're all wearing brain sensors in our earbuds and in our, you know, headphones while we're at work, while we're scanning social media, and you come across an ad, which Facebook knows how long you're spending on that ad. They know whether or not you're looking at it. They know whether or not you've clicked on it, but now they know how your brain reacts to it as well. And they can commodify and sell that information to give much more precise feedback and targeted information to companies. So that is, I think, the reason Meta is partly, at least, really interested in commodifying brain data. And in an interview recently on their AR product launching with the neural interface in 2025, they said as much, which is that, of course, the neural interface watch is going to be integrated with WhatsApp and social media and everything else, which, you know, not hard to connect the dots to figure out that means the brains are going to be connected to all of that, and our brain-based reactions to all the advertisement is going to be sold and commodified to target us.
It's really incredible. I mean, you think clickbait is bad now? It's going to be really bad when AI can tailor it directly to you based on things that you are thinking that you don't necessarily even express. That's really creepy.
Yeah. it's interesting. So I went on to ChatGPT the other day. In my chapter on mental manipulation, I write about brain heuristics, the shortcuts that put our brains in danger of misinformation and manipulation. And I was just curious, like, okay, well, ChatGPT, what are all of the brain heuristics that you know about? Like, what are all the shortcuts that make humans susceptible to disinformation or misinformation or manipulation? And I was able to just spit them all out for me really quickly. And I said, okay, great. And how could generative AI be used to manipulate or tap into all of that to make disinformation worse? And it was very precise in being able to show me all the ways in which generative AI could do so. And I said, great. And so then how does neurotech make that more profound and dangerous? And I had a very thoughtful response about the brain-based response to all of the generative AI and how it could be a generative process, which is, you're like, here's A/B testing, but A/B testing with your brain. Here is a sensational headline with false information that has pseudoscience attached to it, which taps into all of your shortcuts in your brain that make you think quickly, share information, and not actually stop to really verify it. And you just put two side by side and see how the brain reacts to it based on the brain sensors, and then push out the information that is the most likely to lead to the greatest spread.
It's crazy. It's like a virus.
Terrifying possibility.
It's like a virus that's tailored to, that adapts to you. Like it lands on you and goes, this isn't going to work, but here's this other thing that's going to work. And then it pushes out, you push it out to your family and friends, and it lands on them and does the exact same thing. Crazy.
Hey, if you like what you're hearing and seeing, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There's a lot more just like this. You can find the Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to the show.
I know that employers can maybe monitor our brain data for productivity, might keep us honest at work. The truck driver example that you give where they say, hey, this person's tired, they shouldn't be driving, that seems like a good use of this. But of course, then we go all the way down the rabbit hole and we end up with our employers just knowing what we're thinking at work, which is really not what anybody signed up for.
Yeah. I like to lull people into thinking like, yeah, that might be okay. And then, ow, no.
Just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, the tricky thing is this stuff is nuanced, right? It's not all good. It's not all bad. And so one of the examples that I give in the book is fatigue management. So right now, they're subject to, long haul truckers are subject to a whole lot of surveillance because of the cargo that they're carrying, of the fact that they, on the road are much more likely to be dangerous than you or I are in a small car that is unlikely to pose as much damage to other people if we get into a car accident and if we're tired and fall asleep at the wheel. So in order to monitor drivers, there's all kinds of information that's on the car, technology that's on the truck to track their driving and driving behavior. There's also in-cab cameras that are trained on their faces to look and see if they're tired or if they're awake, and other in-cab features to do that, which I say to say they have very little privacy right now on the workplace in their jobs. Brain activity monitors, like brain sensors that monitor their fatigue levels, which have been shown to be really very accurate and maybe even more accurate than some of these other ways to try to see whether or not they're wide awake or asleep by checking the steering wheel or the car. Those types of sensors are already being used by thousands of companies to track truckers. And I don't think that's a particularly bad use of it. I actually think that picking up only fatigue levels from the brain, that you don't have a strong interest in mental privacy if you are a truck driver in how sleepy you are while driving on the job. The challenge is just limiting it to that, right? Which is if an employer is monitoring a person's brain for whether or not they're tired or awake, you could have access to a whole lot more of information about what's happening in the brain. And it shouldn't be, right? We should extract just the piece of information we want, overwrite the rest of the brainwave data, and not use it for those other purposes. And so I show that as an example to say there's a way we could do this, which could be beneficial to society with a minimum impact on individual privacy. And there may be some instances in which we think a person doesn't have an absolute right to keep other people out of their brains. But at the other end of that, like probing a person's brain for, are they thinking about a startup? Are they thinking about unionization? Are they working with people that you want to try to find out if they're trying to collaborate and, rise up against the unfair practices in the workplace? Are they happy or sad when you call them up and offer them a raise to try to, hijack the process of negotiation to make it more favorable to the employer? None of that should be on the table, right? This as a tool of widespread employee surveillance is, I think, a way to take workplaces that are already introducing far too much surveillance and making them truly dystopian, truly unpleasant places that kind of strip us of the humanity and dignity of work.
Yeah, it seems like the negotiation example, which is in the book, is pretty simple to understand, right? Your boss offers you a crappy raise and sees your brain light up, and then you try to negotiate, and they're like, well, we already know that you're interested in the 2% raise we offered, so you're going to take that. So we're just not going to budge. And you go, well, I need 5%. Well, we know you're lying because we saw your reaction from your brainwaves. You can't hide that. That super sucks. And I didn't realize that you could detect people who wanted collective action. But I suppose if we are doing some of the clunking around in the brain, you can sort of figure out what people want to do or what they're thinking about at work, even if it's not like I want to start a union is emblazoned on your head like the Sims game. They can still say like, oh, when this person goes to these meetings, there's a ton of brain activity, or when they're meeting with other people who also have these preferences or stated or otherwise, their brains collectively light up. Like, let's not allow them to work together, or let's fire some of them, or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the ways in which I imagined we could see that kind of unionization busting behavior happening. There's this really cool feature of working together when we're working collaboratively together, which is you start to see synchronization of brainwave activity between individuals. And that's great. It helps people collaborate better. It helps them literally get onto the same wavelength. But, if you were an entrepreneurial employer who was trying to figure out who is having synchronization of brain activity that shouldn't have synchronization of brain activity, right? So these people aren't working together on projects. They don't have any reason to actually be collaborating. And you start to see that kind of sync up between brains. It gives you a tool of surveillance to look into and try to figure it out. And you start seeing that at scale. And you begin to wonder, is there some kind of unionization? Is there some kind of collective action that's starting to start? And so I'm sort of inviting the reader to imagine the possible ways in which, even with the current technology, right, not having to get into real decoding of complex thought in the brain, it still can interfere with freedom of contract. It still can be misused in the workplace. It still can be misused a lot by the government. And we haven't even touched on, we talked about China, but there's already actually a lot of use by governments worldwide of neurotechnology in ways that are good and ways that are bad and nefarious.
Yeah, okay. Understanding that a truck driver is asleep behind the wheel of an 18-ton rig, good. Being able to tell if employees are actually working or jerking around on the internet all day, medium to good. But the amount of stress added to a job because my employer can monitor my brain and I'm already, let's say, an Amazon worker trying to put 1 billion things into little pots at a speed that constantly is increasing. It's already miserable. Now I can't even frickin' go to the bathroom without my boss monitoring what I'm thinking while I'm in there, while I'm on my 15-minute break, or even just while I'm walking between bins. No, thank you. Right? So that the tech does have to be made useful without being made totally oppressive.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly well said, which is the real question for us right now is not whether the tech is here or not. It has arrived. It's not whether the tech is good or bad. It is both. It is how do we make it empowering for people and not introduce the most oppressive kind of Orwellian vision of what this could ultimately be. And since I already give lots of examples of how seeds of that are starting to be planted, how do we turn the tides to make this technology that does just become something that you're happy to have your ring on. You're happy to have your brain sensors on because you're able to, focus on your own brain health and wellness and well-being, and you're able to quantify and see things that you couldn't before. You're able to take your brain health as seriously as you take the rest of your physical health without worrying that your employer is, trying to use it to make it a dystopian workplace, without worrying that the government's going to subpoena all of your brain data and use it against you in whatever context that they want to use it against you for.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm just sort of in my head almost joking, like, this place already sucks enough. I'm already running between bins trying to put someone's stupid fidget spinner in the robot machine before I get dinged and demerited. And now I can't even think about being somewhere else while I'm doing this. I mean, like, screw you, Bezos, or whoever's
well, but
in charge
let me
of it.
underscore that for you for a moment, which is, I can't even think, right? So people have been willing to give up their privacy in so many ways. They say things like, well, I don't have anything to hide, so it doesn't really matter. Or I like getting the personal targeted advertisements. I bought something from my feed last week that was something I didn't even know that I needed. But I want people to really focus on, I can't even think freely, because it's not about whether or not you have something to hide or not. It's not whether or not there's something that could be used that is used against you by the government. It's whether or not you have a space of mental reprieve where you can think freely, whatever you want to think. Anything, right? Imagine, fantasize, have a bad thought. We all have bad thoughts. Have a safe space where that can happen. And that's the space I want us to make sure we preserve and keep, because we say that in jest, but that's what's at risk here, is that ability to actually think freely.
Well, it seems like thought crime, or whatever they had in Minority Report, is not impossible. Again, it sounds dystopian, but okay, maybe I do want people planning to murder other people to be stopped and put into prison, but then again, they haven't actually done anything yet, so good luck drawing that line in the sand. Like, I haven't thought about gutting somebody who's a terrible person, and then, but not really. I'm not really going to do it. I just sort of want you to get pushed into traffic right now because you're a terrible person. I mean, maybe I'm the only one with intrusive thoughts like that, but I assume I'm not, right? Other people, you've been pissed off before. Do I need to get arrested for that?
You have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I think you said something like that.
Right.
So I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I adore my children. They are my life. But when they are both having temper tantrums at exactly the same time, I'm exhausted and want to go to sleep, and they refuse to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. There are times where I think not the best thoughts about, even my kids. And that's okay. We're human. That's part of what it means to be human, is, cursing out and imagining for a moment something terrible happening to the person who just honked in front of you or cut you off in line.
I could make this look like an accident. Oh my God. Well, I would never do that. Well, too late. It's in the thought crime machine.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't want us to have to censor our thoughts more than we already do. And I'll say this, which is, I'm glad we filter our thoughts. I'm glad we don't act on our bad impulses. That's part of thinking freely, is having that space where something, pops up and you're just like, oh God, I'm a terrible person. Of course, I don't want anything terrible to happen to that person in front of me, but wow, they really pissed me off, right? I mean, we go through all of this different kind of filtering, and that's part of us deciding what we want to share with the rest of the world and what we don't want to share with the rest of the world. I don't want those filters to be taken off involuntarily and unconsented to and interpreted, where, you have biases, but you're working actively to overcome them, but your biases can be picked up and detected through neurotechnology. Like, that's none of anybody's business. And how are they going to be able to tell the difference between a bias which you genuinely hold versus one that is an implicit bias that you are working on overcoming?
Yeah,
right?
that's a good
the
point.
Kind of stuff that I want people to have the space to work through being a better human, to being the best version of themselves they want to be whoever they want to be, but to have the space that they can do that, figure that out for themselves.
That's a really good point. Like, maybe you just have a strong aversion to Persian people because your neighbor growing up was a terrible human being, and now every Persian you meet reminds you of them, but then you just pause and you realize that they're not.
Yes.
That little flaw being broadcasted every single time would definitely not be good. in any way.
No, it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good, and it would be, it would change how other people perceive you. It would change your ability to work on yourself. It also change your incentive. Like, yeah, you grew up next to somebody, that's how you felt. But every time you encounter somebody new, like me, who's Persian, you think like, this is a human being I'm going to take on their own terms. I recognize I have that bias, and I'm working against it. I'm working, to put that away. That's part of the exercise of my growth as a human being. But instead, I encounter you, and I see that little, flash that says you're biased against me, and I just think I want nothing to do with you. You have a bias against me, and you're like, no, I'm working on it. It's like this was an early childhood exposure.
Right.
Don't care. Your brain tells me the objective truth. That's not the future we want to live in. That's not how we want to interact with one another. We want the space to continue to grow and change and have that space of mental reprieve.
Also, just as a guy, to have any sort of flash of any, like, I don't want every woman I talk to be like, oh, he's one of those. It's like, I am, but I'm trying not to be. Yes, I am one of those, but really I'm trying not to be. At least not in inappropriate
I can't imagine
situation.
it would be a good thing for most relationships either.
No.
I think I give the example, the tamer version of that is you walk into your friend's house and they have, an ugly, and this really happened to me, but not the brain part of it, right? Where you walk into a person's house and they bought a new couch that they're so proud of, and it is like a hideous mustard yellow. One of my friends is probably listening now, and they're like, oh my God, she's talking about my couch.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
I got to be careful. And, they said, do you like my new couch? And you say, oh, I love it. And you were thinking, that is, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that is
this
the worst
would look
couch
great
I've ever seen.
in a circus tent.
Right.
Yeah, this is, yeah.
Well,
you are Persian, so we know about y'all's decor.
Well, listen, we like our gold and we like our bright yellows and things like that. But in any event, I walked in and I think it's hideous, but did I say that couch is hideous? Did I, register my disgust? No, I said, oh, it's lovely, right?
Yeah, it would be right at home in one of Saddam Hussein's palaces.
It's perfect. It's perfect. So, and that's like those little white lies. Those are okay to tell too. I mean, it's like we can have these thoughts of, no, your yellow couch is hideous, and we don't need to have them broadcast against our will, to other people. We don't need, and in that case, you wouldn't hear through neurotechnology an output that said, no, Nita thinks that it is a hideous couch, but my disgust would register on these brain sensors, right? And if it's like we share location data, if we start to share emotional data, and so my friend says, what do you think of my couch? And then checks the, emotion data that I've shared with everybody in her friend group, and she sees disgust that is registered, that, that changes the nature of interactions with other human beings.
I know people are like, okay, well, I would just turn that feature off, but it's not about that. It's about brain hacking, data leaks in the future. We thought the Equifax credit breach was bad. And for people who don't remember that, I think like 100 million social security numbers and credit scores or whatever were leaked from Equifax. Maybe it wasn't quite that many, but it was a massive, massive breach. What would a hack or data leak of brain data look like? I mean, that could be much more damaging. So what? You have my social security number. That's annoying. But what if you know a bunch of stuff about me that even I don't necessarily realize?
Yeah. So first, I mean, I should say there's some really interesting research that I talk about in the book on functional biometrics. So, and I'm going to start here with response to that because it's useful to know that brain data, just from brain data, can identify a person. And
really?
So, yeah. So there's
so it's biometric or whatever that's called.
Yeah. So what's your? Do you have a favorite song? I mean, you're probably listening to a lot of nursery school rhymes right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking like the wheels on the bus go round and round.
Yeah, exactly.
current
so let's take exactly. So take Wheels on the Bus, which I hear too often and you hear too often, and we could both just like sing that we are right now. We're both singing it in our head for a second. It's playing in our head. So if you use a brain sensor while intentionally recording singing the Wheels on the Bus go round and round in your head, okay, it creates a neural signature, a functional biometric. And then you could use that just like you could use your face to unlock your phone. You could use singing the Wheels on the Bus go round and round in your head to unlock the phone, which means that if you have a whole bunch of data stored in the cloud, a whole bunch of brain data stored in the cloud, and you have people's functional biometric token, right, that has a unique neural signature, you can identify, re-identify de-identified or aggregated data in the cloud to pick up, like if here's an individual storage that this is all of Jordan's data, you can say that's Jordan's data, which you can re-identify. Okay, so we'll start there, which is, it's not so easy to just keep everything anonymous. Re-identification of data has turned out to be very easy over time. The second is there's what we can do today, and then there's the fact that AI is going crazy gangbusters fast in pattern recognition, and there is raw brainwave data. So the kind of data that we're collecting from brains is kind of like full resolution big data. It is, instead of extracting just that one little piece of information, are you fatigued or not, I'm recording a lot of data, and then I'm using, and I shouldn't say scientists can record a whole bunch of data, companies can record a whole bunch of data, and then they can extract the piece of information that they want from it. So if you store all that data and then later want to go back and mine it, you can go back and mine it over time. And if a hacker gets access to it, they can mine it for all kinds of things. From simple things like if I want to figure out if you're suffering from cognitive decline over time, to the scarier things like the fact that already researchers have shown that you can take brain sensors and probe a person's brain for information like their PIN number or their address. Like you can put like different images into the environment, subliminal priming into their computer screen, for example, while they have brain sensors, and then probe for recognition of like, is this your PIN number? Is it this combination? Is it this combination? Is it this combination? So you could actually accurately then get what the information is. That's sort of brain jacking, as opposed to the information in the cloud, which you could mine for a bunch of insights about the person.
So thoughts and emotions are definitely not unique. What about the data itself is unique? What's the fingerprint-like part of my thoughts or brain?
So if you and I both put on a headset, we have to train the headset for a moment using software to our unique brain patterns. So every brain pattern and kind of the way your neurons fire exactly to sing the wheels on the bus depends on your slight differences in wiring in your brain and your slight differences in who you are and all the environmental inputs that led to the slight differences in how your brain actually looks and acts. So you train the device and kind of pair the device to your brain. So the software has like a baseline program. You do the baseline program. After a couple of minutes, it's then customized to you. And that's because while Wheels on the Bus has the same lyrics, how your brain processes it and how my brain processes it are just slightly different, right? So that we can see both people are singing a song in their head and decode that both people are singing a song in their head, but then pick out the differences based on how you're singing it versus how I'm singing it based on how our neurons fire in the brain. And so that's why the best way to think about this is authenticating people rather than identifying people. And what I mean by that is like your, in order to match your face against you, at some point you gave an image of your face, and then every future scan of your face is matching it to that original image. It's authenticating you. And the same as you would give a baseline recording of you singing a song, and then every future attempt would try to match that song to the baseline of you singing the song. And that's how we authenticate people through biometrics. And brain biometrics are unique in that way.
That's really interesting and makes sense. So somebody can identify me via my brainwaves, even if I'm probably in the future, even if I'm not trying to think about something specific as instructed. So will I someday be able to, or be subject to identity checks, not with facial recognition or identification on a card, but because of my brain output? You know, do I go to the airport and then Clear or TSA says, "Don't worry, Mr. Harbinger, we got you when you walked in"?
I think so. I mean, one of the things that I thought was crazy was it was more than a decade ago that TSA, the kind of precursor to that, plus what was Northwest Airlines at the time, were in a partnership to try to figure out if they could remotely pick up brain activity signals as a way to authenticate people in airports.
Wow.
And that didn't go anywhere as far as I know, because it's so noisy, right? Remotely picking up brain activity is right now just sort of a science fiction idea, because you need something, a sensor or something that's actually touching your head to pick up that brain activity. But once you're wearing those sensors all the time, it should be a lot easier to do so. And governments from the US to China, worldwide, are investing heavily in this idea of brain biometrics. And part of the reason why is that static biometrics are easier to fake. Static meaning like they don't change over time. Your face that changes some, but it's still like, other than like a facelift or something, facial reconstruction, it's still static. Functional biometrics, like how you move, changes in your brain activity, those are a lot harder to fake. And so they're considered to be more secure ways of actually authenticating people. So I think passwords will be a thing of the past. And at some point, I believe brain biometrics will be used at wide scale.
It seems like that could also be misused because, like you mentioned, you can't really put a mask over your brain. Or now we're back to tinfoil hats. Maybe those are becoming actually useful, but you can't stop identify. Like I don't have a choice but to identify myself when I'm out and about. It reminds me of when China. This might sort of be apocryphal, but I guess China had this big concert from an artist, and they used facial recognition to capture a bunch of people who were criminals that just happened to attend this concert because they had every single person identified. And they're like, oh, here's this guy that's on the run. We knew he liked this artist and we were looking for it. Or maybe they weren't. Maybe they just found a huge crowd of people and went, oh, here's 3 criminals. Let's go arrest these guys.
Yeah. No, I worry. Look, anytime we give government access to the brain, I worry about it. And, whatever the benefits that could be realized from government access to the brain, I think that the downside potential and the interference with freedom of thought with government access of individual brains is too profound to make it worth it. Like, I'd rather a different kind of biometric. I'm willing to take my insecure password over giving government access to the brain because of the likelihood of interference. And, we already see it happening. With you mentioned Minority Report earlier, and I usually start my first day of criminal law class. I teach first-year students criminal law. Usually start the first day by talking with them about Minority Report. Most of them at this point haven't seen it and have never even heard of it.
It came out before they were born or something. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm like, okay, you got to go watch it because I'm going to make a lot of reference to it in this class because, it is, at least for a certain generation, a really profound movie and making us think about the kind of concept of thought crime. And so I'm catching up at least a few in this generation in seeing the movie. But the idea of interrogating people's brains for crime, that was based on pre-crime. Now, in a bunch of countries, there's brain fingerprinting technology that's being used to interrogate criminal suspects' brains to try to use what they find there to convict them. And that's not Minority Report. That's real. It's happening. This testing for pre-conscious, unconscious signals in the brain of recognition of a murder weapon or a suspect who shouldn't be there, or congruence between two different facts. Like, is the body in the lake? Is the body in the river? Is the body in the house? Right. And then seeing if the brain shows the body is actually in the river because it responds in a particular fashion that can be probed and is being probed by law enforcement worldwide.
I have questions about that. By the way, Minority Report 2002. So when I was jokingly said it came out before they were born, I was not apparently that far off because unless they're...
No, you really weren't.
Wow. Yeah. That makes me feel so old, which is funny because Tom Cruise looks exactly the same now as he does in this movie. The magic of Hollywood.
I mean, that's the good news is that at least when I tell them about it, they've heard of Tom Cruise. And so they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can go watch that movie.
Right.
That's okay.
It's not like when your parents are like, yeah, it reminds me of that picture with, and this is the person who died in 1955. Right. And they're like, oh, yeah, you don't know who that is.
Yeah.
I wonder if being Iranian or Persian has anything to do with your interest in this area, because Iran, for people who don't know, one of the most oppressive countries in the world in terms of the Islamic regime over there, and any government having access to our brains is terrifying. But a government like Iran, which is authoritarian and a theocracy, is just unimaginably horrible because their power is unchecked, and they would absolutely misuse this technology at the first possible opportunity in order to cement their power even further. I just have zero doubt about any government doing this, but especially ones where the power is concentrated into a handful of old dudes.
Yeah. Old religious
fanatics,
pseudo-religious, zealots. So absolutely, the fact that I'm Iranian American has such a huge influence in how I think about this. I grew up with parents who grew up in Iran, who all of my extended family, 17 first cousins, aunts and uncles, all of them still live in Iran. My mother's brothers were in the Shah's military. One of them was kept in prison and threatened with daily execution regularly after the revolution. My parents had intended to go back to Iran. They had just come here for my father to finish his schooling, and were unable to go back because of the revolution. So I grew up in a household where the stories that I heard, the daily conversations, were probably very unlike a lot of other Americans who aren't as attuned to what's happening in an authoritarian regime and don't have family members who are directly affected by it and don't firsthand both talk about it regularly and see it happening. As I've tried to talk with family members there over the years, when the Green Revolution was happening, they are so afraid to talk about it for fear of censorship. And my mother's brother's family literally are under surveillance almost all of the time still. But they're so afraid to talk about it that in the couple of times that I've been to Iran, even being in a car with them, they will, you'll bring up something political and they'll say, no, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it in here, on the assumption that at all times, in all places, they're being listened to, even when they're not, right? And the chilling effect that has on people is so much more profound than you can really understand and appreciate if you haven't been exposed to it, because it doesn't matter how good the technology is, the control and the brutality and the randomness with which that control and power is exercised has such a psychological hold on people that it is chilling. And so when I think about a technology like this, which somebody else might just look at and think oh, you know what, she's being sensationalist, this is all good, it's all exciting, we should just be looking at the upside of technology, my mind instantly goes to, how is Iran going to use it? And what is it going to do to the one space that people have? They're afraid to talk to me. What's going to happen if their thoughts could be monitored as well? Or even if they just believe that their thoughts are being monitored. And so, I think I've always approached technology with that greater degree of alarm and skepticism and concern of looking at the possibilities and then seeing them play out. And that doesn't mean that we in the United States should be, should kind of rest easily thinking well, okay, but we're not there, and so the government isn't going to misuse it against us. I give a lot of examples of bad misuses that have happened here in the United States too.
Well, plus the sort of 20 questions game you mentioned earlier with what sounds like neural spyware, where you can show people images or numbers or something. I mean, yeah, you could get somebody's PIN number. It seems like a long way to go to rob somebody. But what if you wanted to find out somebody's secrets, like their sexuality, and they weren't open about that, or something they did? That all seems quite possible with this technology.
Or what if you're a politician and you really want to know whether or not you can, figure out who's going to vote and how you can push them and what things push their buttons in order to do so. I mean, we already saw an example of that with Cambridge Analytica. What if you have much more exacting information that you can buy and commodify? And if, what's being sold by companies to politicians is brain-based reactions of information, it is not hard to imagine manipulation of campaigns and democracy in modern times here in the United States with misuse of this kind of data.
Tell me about this P300 brainwave that seems like a lie detector almost.
Yeah, it's not that, but it's certainly been touted as one, and
Sure.
so it's a great question. So this goes back a very long way in neuroscience research, which was the discovery that a person's brain reacts before they're consciously aware of it. And the example is that there was an experiment where people were told, like, here's a left click button and here's a right click button. Whenever you have the urge, click left or click right, but don't tell me when it is. Just whenever you have the urge to click the button, and make a note of the time as you're clicking. So here's a little stopwatch in front of you. Just mentally make a note of that time. And what they found was, before a person was consciously aware of their urge to click and could record that time, about 200 to 400 milliseconds beforehand, their brain registered a response, this kind of wave, this P300 wave. And so some entrepreneurial researchers thought, I wonder if we could use that for other things. And I wonder if we could use that kind of preconscious signaling to have it light up in recognition to something. And so they showed people a series of images and saw across a lot of different contexts that P300 shows up. So there was a researcher by the name of Larry Farwell who decided that he wanted to figure out if he could create something called brain fingerprinting technology, which is to take that P300 signal and apply it in the criminal context. Show people, go to a police file, find information that hadn't been shared with the public and shouldn't otherwise be known, and show a series of those images or words or prompts to a person and see whether or not their brain showed recognition or lack of recognition. And the signals look different. The amplitude of the wave that is kind of read out looks different if you recognize something or if you don't recognize something. And so the idea of using the P300 was to show, if I show you things that you shouldn't know from a crime scene, and your brain shows recognition as opposed to lack of recognition, that tells us something about your likelihood of being guilty or being innocent.
Right, if I've seen the body and nobody else but the police has seen the body, I might be the guy who put the body there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you've seen the body because it is somebody you know, you're going to have recognition of it regardless. And so you have to be careful about how you design the probe. And that's been part of the challenge, is that it's kind of an art form rather than a science form to design those probes in ways that really show recognition that matters to us, recognition because you shouldn't know it otherwise. And so something that's a unique piece of clothing at the crime scene that you shouldn't have seen, there's no reason you should recognize it, or images of the crime scene, right? So you described the body, the mangled body that you should definitely not have any recognition of because you haven't seen it in that way. If you have recognition of that, that may say you were there or you did it. And there's other signals like this in the brain. There's something called the N400 signal. I mentioned congruence. This is the idea that these two things go together or these two things don't go together. And so you could say I want to know if these two things go together. And so I say, the body and dead, or the body and alive, or your wife and dead and the wife and alive. And you're trying to see which things pair in the person's brain and which things don't pair in a person's brain, and then make inferences again to try to probe the brain for information. And that is a technique that lots of places are investing a whole lot of money in. DARPA has a big program right now, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, which always, is investing in the cutting edge and sometimes really scary and sci-fi seeming things. They have
the
a
internet.
Program that's focused on that, like the internet.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's being used, that test, that P300. He introduced it, got a ton of funding here in the United States. It's happened in a few cases here, but it hasn't taken off, and the scientists really have been very down on the P300. Nevertheless, he, in what really could be a movie of its own, sold the technology to this company called Brainwave Sciences that had Michael Flynn and this ex-KGB spy on the board of it and stuff. And they started selling it across the world to other law enforcement. And those, police, there are reports of them regularly using this technique to, convict people of murder.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, jumping the shark just a little bit, or jumping the gun just a little bit. Well, I know we're basically out of time here, but what should we expect in terms of how this tech deploys and unfolds over the next few years? How close are we to reality for stuff both like Neuralink or the earbuds that you mentioned actually being useful? And when can I upload my brain to the internet?
All good questions. I'm gonna do one thing first, which is I'm gonna say I think it's here, and we can expect within the next 2 to 5 years it to be really just widespread, like as common as the other kinds of technology that we have. But we have a moment, like we have like a millisecond, where I think we could do it differently. Like we've talked about a lot of the kind of more frightening aspects of this. And the biggest reason I wrote this book, besides helping people to really understand the technology and where it is and where it's going, is to give a pathway forward, right? To say there is a pathway forward by recognizing what I call a right to cognitive liberty. And I lay out what that idea is and how we can use it in the book. And that pathway, I think, would change the terms of service and change our relationship with the technology in ways that could empower people and make the kind of scary downside less likely to occur. But we only have a little bit of time, because to your question of when is it coming, just this spring, in the next few weeks, the multifunctional earbuds are launching. Headphones are launching this spring with major headphone manufacturers that have the brain sensors embedded in it. You can already pick up a neurotech headset from, dozens and dozens of companies. Neuro gamers are already playing video games using these headsets. It's just going to become more ubiquitous. Meta is launching their neural interface in early 2025. The question of when is it here? It's here. How widespread is it going to be in the next couple of years? It's going to be quite widespread. By 5 years, I expect it to be pervasive across society. As for uploading your brain, you got a little bit more time. I think that we really have to have the likes of Neuralink and other companies end up with their products being really safe and effective, and people wanting to implant them in the brain to get to the point where we have such high resolution that you get to upload the entirety of your brain. And then you got to ask the question, why would you possibly do so?
Yes, exactly. What are you thinking? Well, we know what you're thinking, I guess, at that point. Yeah. Nita, thank you so much. Really, really fascinating, really interesting. And I think in a few years, people will look back at this and say, wow, she was right about probably everything. And hopefully we do sort of they miss us with the totalitarian control element of this, and we stick to the good stuff. I guess time will tell.
I hope that's right. I hope we move quickly toward adopting a right to cognitive liberty, so that when we look back on this a few years ago, we say whew, we dodged a bullet, and we're all enjoying that, and we just share that with each other, brain to brain.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this entire episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show. If you're interested in exploring this topic further, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show podcast feed. There, we dive even deeper on this and many other topics. In the audio podcast, I also close open loops, cover things discussed off camera, off air, and give some parting lessons from our guest. You can find The Jordan Harbinger Show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any podcast app, or at jordanharbinger.com. And also, if you found this episode useful, please share it with those you care about. Last but not least, like, comment, and subscribe.